There are 6 psychological stages a narcissist may move through when they lose someone who once played an important role in their emotional world. But before we get into those stages, there is something important to understand. The word stages can make this sound like a perfectly organized sequence where one reaction ends, another begins, and everything unfolds according to a predictable timeline. That is rarely how narcissistic psychology works. These experiences can overlap, reverse, accelerate, or disappear for periods of time before returning again. A narcissist may move through several of them simultaneously, creating behavior that looks completely irrational from the outside. Yet beneath that apparent chaos, there is usually a psychological pattern. Once you understand what is happening underneath the behavior, many of the things you have already witnessed begin to make considerably more sense. That underlying psychology is what matters most, because conversations about narcissists losing someone often concentrate almost entirely on visible behavior. People talk about the sudden messages, the attempts to reconnect, the smear campaigns, the dramatic social media posts, or the appearance of a new relationship. They focus on what the narcissist does after losing access to someone. But behavior is only the outer layer of the process. Beneath it is a much more complicated psychological system involving self-protection, wounded self-image, emotional dependency, control, and an intense resistance to experiencing certain feelings directly. Understanding that internal machinery gives you a completely different perspective. Instead of wondering why their behavior seems so contradictory, you begin to recognize what each reaction may be attempting to accomplish psychologically. The first stage is often the one that surprises people the most, because it does not initially look like distress. If someone loses a meaningful relationship, most people expect some visible indication that the loss has affected them. They might expect anger, sadness, pleading, retaliation, or some obvious emotional reaction. With a narcissist, however, the first response can look remarkably different. There may be an almost unsettling sense of calm. They continue with their routine. They appear socially unaffected. They may post online as though absolutely nothing important has happened. When mutual acquaintances mention the relationship ending, they might speak about it casually, without appearing remotely shaken. From a distance, it can look as though they simply turned the page without feeling anything at all. For the person who walked away, that apparent lack of reaction can be incredibly painful. You may watch them behaving normally, and immediately begin questioning everything you experienced together. You might wonder whether you mattered as much as you thought you did. You may even start believing that the relationship was meaningful only to you, while they were already prepared to replace you before you ever left. Their calmness can seem like proof that your absence made no difference whatsoever. But what appears to be emotional peace may actually be a defensive response. Rather than calmly accepting the loss, the narcissist may be psychologically reducing its importance so they do not have to confront what the loss represents. The outside picture says, "This does not matter." Internally, something much more complicated may be taking place. This is where devaluation becomes important. The narcissist may begin mentally rewriting the relationship so that it feels less significant than it actually was. Instead of acknowledging everything the connection meant, they may focus on your flaws, the problems in the relationship, the things they disliked about you, or the reasons they can supposedly do better without you. You are no longer represented in their internal story as someone deeply important who has been lost. Instead, the narrative gradually becomes that you were never that special, the relationship was never that meaningful, and losing you was actually beneficial. This can happen without deliberate planning. It is often a defensive psychological process designed to reduce the emotional impact of reality. If something can be made to feel insignificant internally, then the pain associated with losing it becomes easier to avoid. That distinction matters because the apparent indifference is not necessarily evidence that the narcissist has processed the breakup in a healthy way. Processing loss requires acknowledging that something meaningful existed and allowing the associated emotions to be experienced. Devaluation does almost the opposite. It changes the story so the loss does not have to be fully acknowledged in the first place. The relationship becomes something that can be dismissed, minimized, or blamed. You may therefore see someone behaving as though they have moved on immediately, while internally, they have not actually resolved anything. They have simply created a version of events that protects their self-image from the emotional consequences of admitting that someone important is truly gone. The second stage begins when that internal rewriting is no longer enough to keep reality away. Eventually, the absence itself starts creating evidence that the narcissist cannot completely explain away. During the relationship, they may have taken many things you provided for granted because those things were simply always available. It was not only the obvious attention, admiration, affection, or reassurance. There were countless smaller forms of emotional supply woven into everyday life. You knew how they liked certain things done. You remembered details about their past. You understood their moods without needing everything explained. You knew what could irritate them, what could calm them, what made them laugh, and what kind of attention they wanted when they were feeling insecure. These details can become invisible, precisely because they are so consistently present. Once you are gone, those small forms of familiarity disappear too. The empty spaces begin becoming noticeable. The routine changes. There is no longer someone automatically responding in the way they had become accustomed to. The narcissist may discover that the person they mentally reduced to not that important occupied far more space in their daily emotional environment than they wanted to admit. This is where the carefully constructed indifference can begin to weaken. Reality starts contradicting the story. The absence becomes concrete rather than theoretical. They may still tell themselves they are perfectly fine, but certain moments begin exposing the gap. A familiar situation reminds them of you. Something happens and there is nobody responding the way you used to. The silence starts feeling different from the freedom they imagined. This can produce an internal form of panic that is very different from openly expressing sadness. The narcissist may not sit down and consciously say, "I am devastated because I lost this person." Instead, there can be a growing sense that something is wrong, something is missing, and the situation is becoming less controllable than expected. They may realize that the loss is more permanent than they originally assumed. They may also become increasingly concerned about whether you are actually moving forward without them. This is often where the urge to regain access begins developing. The impulse behind future hoovering can start here, even if no message is sent yet. The narcissist may begin wondering whether the door is still open, whether you still care, and whether they still have the ability to draw you back into the dynamic. That curiosity can lead to increased monitoring. Someone who previously acted completely uninterested may suddenly become unusually attentive to your online presence. They might look at your posts, observe changes in your behavior, or quietly gather information through mutual acquaintances. Questions may be disguised as casual concern. They might want to know whether you are doing well, whether you are struggling, whether you have started seeing someone else, or whether your life appears happier without them. On the surface, this can resemble curiosity about an ex-partner. Psychologically, however, the motivation may be more connected to uncertainty and loss of control than genuine emotional concern. They are trying to determine what your absence means for them and whether they still have some influence over the situation. What they discover during this period can determine how quickly the next stage appears. If they see you struggling, they may interpret that as evidence that you still need them. If they see you thriving, becoming more confident, emotionally detached, or involved in a new chapter, the reaction can be very different. Your ability to continue without them can challenge the story they created about the relationship. If they believed you would eventually return, your continued absence becomes threatening. If they believed you would remain emotionally attached, your independence creates uncertainty. And when that uncertainty collides with a wounded sense of self, the emotional response can shift dramatically. This is where the third stage can emerge, sometimes suddenly and with far more intensity than the calmness of the first stage ever suggested. The third stage is rage. But it is important not to confuse this with ordinary anger following a painful breakup. Normal anger can come from disappointment, sadness, betrayal, or unresolved grief. Narcissistic rage has a different psychological function. It can emerge when the person's self-image has been seriously challenged by rejection, abandonment, loss of control, or the realization that someone they expected to remain available has actually chosen to leave. The emotional reaction is not simply, "I am hurt because I lost someone." It can become, "How dare this person make me experience being rejected, powerless, or unimportant?" That distinction is crucial. The intensity of the reaction may reveal just how threatening the loss has become to the narcissist's internal sense of superiority, control, or significance. This is why the rage can appear disproportionate to the actual event. The breakup itself may have been relatively quiet, but the reaction afterward can become extremely aggressive. The narcissist may suddenly attack your character, question your motives, rewrite the history of the relationship, or portray themselves as the injured party. The goal is often not simply to express anger. It can also serve as an attempt to restore a damaged self-image. If they can redefine you as cruel, unstable, selfish, disloyal, or impossible to love, then they no longer have to confront the more uncomfortable reality that you chose to leave and they could not prevent it. The story changes from "I was rejected" to "I rejected someone who was never worthy of me." This is also where a smear campaign may begin. The campaign is not necessarily random, even when it appears chaotic. Because the narcissist has spent significant time learning about you, they may know which parts of your reputation are most vulnerable to misunderstanding. They may understand which mutual friends are easiest to influence, which private details can be presented without context, and which personal experiences can be rearranged into a story that makes them appear reasonable. Something you once shared privately can suddenly become evidence against you. A disagreement can be retold as proof of your supposed instability. A boundary can be presented as cruelty. Your decision to leave can be described as betrayal. The more convincing the revised story becomes to others, the easier it becomes for the narcissist to avoid confronting the reality of what happened. The disturbing part is that people who were once close to you may hear a version of the relationship that bears very little resemblance to what you experienced. The narcissist may position themselves as the patient one who tried everything, while portraying you as the person who caused the relationship to fail. They may emphasize your mistakes while quietly removing their own behavior from the story. They can present selected facts without the context that gives those facts their actual meaning. This can leave you feeling as though you are watching your own history being rewritten in front of you. And because the narcissist may tell the story with confidence and emotional certainty, people who were not present for the relationship can sometimes accept the version that sounds most convincing, rather than the version that is most complete. At this point, it becomes important to remember that visible hostility does not necessarily mean the narcissist has stopped caring about the loss. In some cases, intense hostility can actually indicate how psychologically significant the loss has become. The stronger the threat to their self-image, the stronger their need may become to regain control of the narrative. This is why someone can move from acting completely indifferent to intensely attacking you, without the contradiction being as random as it first appears. The first response was designed to minimize the significance of the loss. The second response emerged when the absence became impossible to ignore. The third response attempts to push the emotional discomfort outward by making someone else responsible for it. And this is exactly why these stages should never be treated as a simple timeline where one reaction permanently replaces another. A narcissist can move from rage back into apparent indifference. They can attack you publicly while privately monitoring you. They can begin a new relationship while still checking whether you are emotionally available. They can tell everyone that they have forgotten you while simultaneously looking for signs that you have not forgotten them. The contradictions are part of what makes these dynamics so confusing. But when you understand the underlying psychological function, the contradictions become easier to recognize. The behavior may change rapidly, but the central struggle remains connected to the same question. How can the narcissist protect their sense of self from the emotional consequences of losing access to someone they once expected to remain available? That is why understanding what happens after the loss can be more valuable than obsessing over every individual behavior. A message does not automatically mean love. Anger does not automatically mean indifference. A new relationship does not automatically mean emotional closure. Silence does not automatically mean peace. Each behavior has to be understood within the larger psychological pattern surrounding it. The goal is not to decode every social media post or analyze every indirect message. The goal is to understand the mechanism well enough that you no longer need to interpret every move as a statement about your worth. Once you recognize that much of the reaction may be connected to the narcissist's internal struggle with rejection, control, self-image, and emotional discomfort, their behavior loses some of the power it once had over your own emotional state. The third stage is often the most confusing for people who genuinely loved the narcissist, because the person creating the new story is using information that exists only because you once trusted them. Everything you revealed during moments of closeness can suddenly become material they use against you. Your vulnerabilities, private conversations, personal struggles, mistakes, fears, and even the details you shared because you believed you were emotionally safe can be pulled apart and presented in whatever way supports their version of events. The intimacy you created together becomes part of the weapon used to destroy the relationship afterward. That is what makes this stage so disturbing. The very access they received because you trusted them can later become the source of their most damaging attacks. What once represented closeness is transformed into evidence against you, allowing them to construct a completely different explanation for why the relationship ended. But the rage in stage 3 is not primarily about hurting you, even though hurting you can absolutely become part of what happens. At its deepest level, the rage is about regaining control over the story. Your departure created a version of events that the narcissist could not comfortably accept. If you left calmly, clearly, and without creating the chaos they expected, your actions communicated something powerful to everyone watching. They communicated that you had reached a point where remaining in the relationship was no longer acceptable to you. That reality can threaten the narcissist's preferred image of themselves. So the response becomes an attempt to rewrite the meaning of your departure before other people settle on their own interpretation. The narcissist needs a different explanation, one where they are not the person who was rejected or exposed, but the person who was supposedly mistreated. This is why the intensity of stage 3 can become so revealing. The reaction often seems far larger than the event itself. The anger is not simply strong, it can appear strangely excessive, personal, and relentless. People observing from the outside may not understand why such a dramatic response is necessary, over a relationship that the narcissist previously claimed meant very little. Even people who become involved in the smear campaign can sometimes sense that something about the reaction does not fit the story they are being told. Healthy anger usually has some relationship to the situation that caused it. Narcissistic rage can seem to exceed that proportion entirely. It can look less like someone accepting a painful ending and more like someone whose entire internal stability has been shaken by what the ending represents. The intensity itself can reveal how deeply threatening the loss has become. That does not mean the rage should be romanticized or interpreted as proof of healthy love. It is important not to confuse emotional destabilization with emotional maturity. A person can be deeply affected by losing someone and still respond in destructive ways. In fact, the inability to tolerate the loss may be exactly what creates the destructive behavior. The narcissist may be experiencing the consequences of losing something important without having the emotional tools to process that importance honestly. Instead of saying, "This person mattered to me, and I am hurting because they are gone," the psychological system converts that vulnerability into anger, blame, superiority, accusation, or retaliation. The pain is transformed into something that feels more powerful. Anger is easier to defend than grief. Blame is easier to tolerate than responsibility. Attack is easier than admitting that someone else's absence has created an emotional wound. And this is why stage 3 can reveal something that the narcissist would probably never communicate directly. Their reaction can expose the significance of the loss, even while their words attempt to deny it. The more desperately they need to convince everyone that you were worthless, difficult, unstable, or replaceable, the more obvious the contradiction can become. If you truly meant nothing, there would be very little reason to spend so much energy controlling the narrative surrounding your departure. The intensity of the reaction may therefore tell you that the loss has created a psychological disturbance they do not know how to acknowledge. But there is an important distinction here. The fact that your absence affects them does not mean they are capable of giving you the relationship you deserved. Being affected by losing you and being capable of loving you in a healthy way are two completely different things. Eventually, however, rage has a limit. A person cannot remain in a state of emotional escalation forever. At some point, the energy begins to collapse. The arguments stop. The accusations become repetitive. The public performance loses momentum. The narcissist has said what they wanted others to hear, created whatever narrative they needed, and exhausted the immediate emotional energy that kept the conflict alive. Then, something changes. The silence returns, but this time it feels completely different from the silence at the beginning. Stage 1 was a silence built as a defense. It was the appearance of not caring before reality had fully caught up with them. Stage 4 is different. It is what remains after the anger has burned itself out. There may be no dramatic performance left, no immediate person to blame, and no obvious emotional outlet available. What is left is much quieter and considerably harder to hide from themselves. Stage 4 can resemble grief, but it is a very different kind of grief from the experience most emotionally healthy people recognize. The narcissist may not consciously identify what they are feeling as grief, because doing so would require admitting that something meaningful was genuinely lost. And admitting that something mattered can challenge the defensive structure they have relied upon for protection. Their internal system may be built around maintaining the belief that they are never truly dependent on anyone, that people can always be replaced, and that losing someone does not fundamentally diminish them. But when the distractions become quieter, the absence can still remain. It can appear indirectly as restlessness, irritation, dissatisfaction, boredom, emotional emptiness, or a strange sense that something about life is not quite right. The feeling exists, but the person experiencing it may struggle to connect it to its actual source. This creates a particularly difficult internal situation because the narcissist may sense the consequences of the loss without being able to process the loss itself. They may feel uncomfortable without understanding why. Their current life may look perfectly functional from the outside, yet internally there can be an ongoing dissatisfaction that nothing seems capable of resolving. They may become more impatient, more easily frustrated, or increasingly critical of the people around them. They may seek new stimulation, new attention, or new admiration because distraction temporarily covers the emptiness. But distraction does not necessarily resolve the underlying issue. It simply gives the uncomfortable feeling somewhere else to go. And because the narcissist may have limited capacity for honest self-reflection, they may continue searching externally for the solution to something that is actually connected to an unresolved internal experience.